2000 ELO is the entry door to mastering chess. While everyone would love to get there, most chess players get stuck before reaching the trading. I also personally plateaued around 1900 ELO for more than 1 year until I found a way not only to cross 2000 ELO, but actually to push my rating all the way up to 2500 online. So, these are the 5 steps that you need to follow in every chess game if you also want to say hi to 2000 ELO. Let's go! Step number 1 is to learn how to play logically every stage of the game: opening, middle game, endgame. Most chess players know the opening principles. I like to summarize them to CDC: control the center, develop your pieces, castle, and the 3 dawns. Don't move the queen out too early, don't move the same piece twice, don't push too many pawns. But there is a problem. Applying those principles is, first of all, not so easy. And sometimes you need to learn the reason behind those principles, because in some cases you have to follow them, in some cases you don't have to follow them. That's why there is a huge confusion. Let's start with an example. This is one game played by one of my students, and here he chose a wrong move. I asked him, what do you think? And try to respond as well. What do you think is the best way to complete your development? If you would have a few moves in a row, what would you do? And the right answer is definitely bishop c4. You are targeting f7, which is a very weak point right now. Then you notice that there is a queen on b6, right? So you can't easily develop this bishop. And also the queen is in this diagonal where the king would be. So right now I would still castle. After bishop c4 I would still castle, but then we need to find a way to develop this bishop, and probably I want to go on e3 so that I'm interfering in between the queen and the king, and actually the queen is in a bad spot. How do I defend the b2 pawn? Probably I would play bishop b3. So bishop c4, bishop b3, castle, bishop e3, and then I can always keep going with queen d2, knight g5. This is how you should think during an opening once you don't know anymore the theory. Think about the entire forest, not only a tree. And this is what he did wrong here, because he followed just one idea without keeping in mind the entire picture, what he should do logically in this position. And it's this knight, which is a bit misplaced, right? And he wanted to win that knight, so he went with knight g5. But the problem is that this knight, once you're attacking a piece, they can just protect it. And now this knight on g5 has just one purpose. You have moved this knight twice just because you want to attack f7. And so he kept going with g4 to attack this knight. The knight moved, and then he played queen f3. The problem is that now he lost most of his advantage because the castle is no longer safe. Long castle is also not safe, and he lost a bit of harmony, while the knight actually got improved, because the knight was worse on h5 than it is on g7, because from g7 might go on e6 and get traded. Of course, black needs to defend this point with the move knight h6, I guess. But yeah, this was a bad moment where you shouldn't move the same piece twice, but you should rather follow the opening principle. But attention, because this is not always the case. For example, here we go, we have a very famous opening. White is attacking this pawn and looking at f7. So very important here to protect this pawn, and this is a logical move for black. But in a few moves you have to play something that is a compromise. Bishop c4, threatening mate. We protect it with the move g6. The queen goes back, attacking, threatening mate one more time. We stop it by developing another piece. That's very good. Now white can play so many tricky moves if they want to really try to give checkmate here. Move number 1 is g4. What is their idea? They want to push this pawn, attack this knight. How do you defend this? If you keep going with your logical development, this would be bishop g7, castle d6, bishop e6. That would be a mistake, because after g5 you lose a piece. So here already you need to make a compromise, because there is a precise threat And there are two ways to defend. One is h6. This is a classic defense. But then we have my favorite, the counterattack. And now we play knight e4. We are moving the same piece twice, but in this scenario, we are completely justified. Because first of all, why don't you have to move the same piece twice? Because you lose a tempo. By moving the same piece twice, you don't use one move where you could develop another one. But here actually, if we see at tempo, we are moving the knight again, but we are forcing the queen to move again. So we are not even losing a tempo, which is great. Now the queen has to move, defending also this pawn, and trying to keep all these pawns protected will be basically impossible. So if you want to see the evaluation bar, here black is already crushing it. But let's go to see another possible idea, because here white can play the move queen b3. Again, they are not following the opening principles, so something is wrong here. But if we blindly keep going with our plan, bishop g7 castle, we are in bad shape. How to defend that pawn? Again, there is a classic defense, queen e7. This is a good move. Usually I don't like queen e7 if we are blocking this bishop. But since the bishop wants to go on g7, that would be fine. But you have even better, which is knight d4, counterattack. And here you also need to calculate a bit. Every time you don't follow an opening principle, you have to be sure. Also, there is a concrete reason. You're attacking the queen, but attention, the bishop can take here with check, no? So the king has to move, but now white has a big problem. Bishop is under attack. And the queen is under attack. There is just one square for this queen to keep the bishop protected. This not, queen c4, only square. But now, if we attack the queen one more time with the pawn, the queen has to move one more time, and this bishop will be lost. So black is winning a piece after 7 moves. So, in the opening, make sure to keep in mind the big picture and understand why you need to actually follow opening principles. Big picture is even more important in the middle game, once we are going from the opening towards the middle game. Because there is one thing that you need to study, and is not opening theory, but middle game plans. In this position, one of my students was out of theory, and he played a wrong move, which is queen d2. He was remembering something that is happening in another line, because here, if we go back after d6, white plays d4, pawn takes, queen takes, and after knight c6 attacking the queen, there is the Magnus variation in the Sicilian, which is to play queen d2. And the idea is then to keep going with b3, bishop out, long castle, and attack on the king side. The problem is that in this position is completely different. Queen d2 is a bad move in this position. So what we need to do in order not to confuse, not to play wrong moves in wrong situations, is to understand what is the big picture in this precise position. What is the middle game plan here? And here white is not going to castle long. No. White is going to castle short with knight f3, castle, and then attack on the king side with moves like f5, for example, but also with moves like queen e1, queen h4, f5, bishop h6, for example. So the best move in this position is very simple. Is knight f3. After bishop g7 to castle. And after castle to bring the queen on e1 with the idea that we mentioned before. When you study the middle game plans, don't focus only on your ideas, but try to understand, okay, what is black going to play in this position? What white needs to know is that black has basically two ideas. One is to put pressure on this pawn with moves like rook b8. And sometimes if you push b3, you need to be careful to all the possible tactics with knight moving and the bishop pointing towards the rook. If white plays right, those tactics are not working, and white usually is taking care of the queen side by playing moves like b3, rook b1, bishop d2. Keeping everything protected, and then white can move towards the queen side. Second plan that you need to keep care of is the move c4. wanting to trade their weak pawn. So bishop a6 and c4 is a possible move. Also, queen b6 is very possible. Now you get the idea. Look, the queen is looking at the king, so c4 would actually be a discovery check, trading the pawn. That's why the best move for white here is king h1. Simple, if you know the ideas. Now, how to study middle game plans? And the answer is master games. I will give you one example and show you how we can play aggressively against 1d4 and how to extract all the plans from master games. This is just a world champion, Garry Kasparov with the black pieces, which is playing the King's Indian. In this opening, black is developing the pieces in a very clear way. g6, bishop g7, and then d6 castle and e5. White on the other side is expanding at the center of the board with e4, well, with c4 first, then knight c3, and then e4. We play d6, bishop e2, and the move e5. The critical position we reach after the move knight c6, attacking the center of the board, and usually white is responding with the move e5. Knight goes on e7, and now we have a clear starting position for this middle game. Black is going to attack on the king side. You see also the pawns are showing an arrow pointing towards the white king. Instead, white is going to attack on the queen side. You see also the arrow here. The pawns are looking that direction. Why? Because actually black has more space here on the king side, while white has more space on the other one. So here white is playing the move knight e1. It's a defensive idea. Usually white wants to be able to play f3 to stop the f-pawn for advancing. After knight e7, bishop e3, f5 is coming on the board. And this is exactly what we want to do. We want to play f5, f4, g5, g4, g3 even, bring all the pieces and try to give checkmate. White wants to play c5, open up the c file, bring a rook, bring the knight, attack this pawn, and try to win material. Okay, white is playing f3, blocking our f-pawn. If not, we would push probably all the way up. f4, attacking the bishop has to move, g5, very straightforward. b4, white is doing the same on the other side. Now what black is doing is to bring back the pieces, improve the knight. They went backwards to allow the pawns to be pushed, and now they go back. One very nice idea is sometimes to go with the knight on h4, sometimes to push this pawn, sometimes to bring this queen either to h4 or to h5. White is taking on d6 and bringing the rook on the open file. Knight b5 is one of the next ideas for white. And black here is playing rook f7. You might say like, what's that? This move has many purposes, is guarding the square on c7, but also allowing the move bishop f8, because from f8, the bishop is protecting this pawn, and this pawn is going to be attacked by the knight on b5 very soon. So like this, black is free to go with the queen to do more sensible things. a4, bishop f8, a5, bishop d7, stopping, preparing for the move knight b5. In some cases, you don't really want to trade this bishop for the knight because you don't have any more too many attacking chances. This bishop is very important for the attack. So after knight b5, this move was not the one played, but actually this is a mistake because of a concrete reason. Your g4 now is possible without black having to play the move h5, because this pawn actually is protected just twice while it's attacked 3 times. But this move is not available because now that the knight is on b5, this pawn is hanging. So the pawn wasn't taken. White went with the knight on c7, attacking the rook. Now it's beautiful because we start with some sacrifices. g3 is the move played, the rook is taken, and black is not even taking back, but going with knight h5. And this is beautiful. This bishop is basically trapped there because after bishop takes, there is queen h4, and how to stop the mate here? h3, bishop takes. After pawn takes, we take with the queen, and there is just no way to save the mate. Well, maybe you have to give away the rook, but there will be mates in a few moves. So after knight h5, white played the move king h1, and now black is ready for another sacrifice. Pawn takes, rook takes, and knight g3. Because this knight cannot be taken again. After this, the rook has to move, well, queen h4, this, and checkmate. So the king has to dance again, going on g1. And now black is just cleaning up the board. Because, again, this knight cannot be taken, because simply the queen is coming back to do the same, deliver checkmate on h2, and there is not really a way to stop even this one. After bishop c4, we see another beautiful plan. Black is using the queen to attack the king from the queen side. a6. It seems like you're stopping just b5, which is one of the main idea of white here, to open even more files, maybe to bring the rook. But instead, queen a7, pinning the rook. The king, of course, cannot be moved. b5, hoping for the move b6, stopping, shutting down the queen. But after pawn takes, bishop takes, the beautiful move that ended this game was knight h1. Simply there is no way to save the rook, and after king takes, queen take f2, there are so many checkmates idea, and also black has material advantage, so black resigned. White resigned. We are ready for step number 3, which is probably the most important one, and is how to balance tactical play and positional play. Is it good enough to be a good tactical player? Is it good enough to be a good positional player? No. You need both. Positional play is guiding you to know the logical move in every situation so that you can build up a good position. Tactic is going to help you to execute once your opponent makes mistakes. Now, I want to show you one position where one of my students made a mistake. And my question is, do you think it's a tactical or a positional mistake? The move is e5. Now you might say, what is the problem? Well, because this pawn is protected just twice, attacked 3 times. But the idea was that this knight is pinned. So after pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes, there is the in-between move, bishop take f3, pawn takes, and queen takes on e5. Now it seems like, okay, here the material is equal. But the reason why e5 is a mistake is that at this point and in this position, there is still queen a4 check, winning a piece. So actually black is a piece down, will be a piece down. What do you think? e5, tactical or positional mistake? In my opinion, both. Because tactically, we saw the line that makes black lose a piece. But positionally, black opened up the center, went for the breakthrough without having castled the king. And that's why, this is just a small example, but I strongly believe that positional play and tactical play go together. When you play good positional chess, all the tactics will be in your favor. When you play bad positional chess, you will have tactics against you, working for your opponent. For positional play, I would like to recommend this book, which is written by John Nunn, Understanding Chess Move by Move. I studied this book, it helped me a lot. I might even make a video about it. For tactical play, I would like to recommend you a specific course. And this Tactic Ninja by Chess Mood. While explaining all the tactical patterns that you must know, it also has more than 2,000 puzzles. If you solve those, this will be a huge boost of your rating. Usually you need a paid membership to access this course, but there is an exclusive opportunity to get it for free. During the Chess Mood annual Thanksgiving, you can use my link to claim your gift and get access to all their courses. November 20th to December 20th. The earlier you get access, the more days you have to explore it. They have over 500 hours of grandmaster content, a full under 2000 section, a complete opening repertoire for white and black, how to play middle games, how to calculate, how to avoid blunders, and even many of the most beautiful classical games. Get access to all these courses today for free at chessmood.com/Alessia. Link is in the description, or you can also click a cute QR code somewhere there around. If you decide to stay with them beyond the free monthly gift, it will also be a great way to support my channel, so thank you for that. Now let's go on to step number 4. 3 golden rules to follow in every endgame. Let's have a look at this position. Again, it's one of my students. And usually I say that in the endgames you have to have active king, active pieces, and push your passed pawns. Many times I've heard king in the center in the endgame. But actually it's a bit imprecise, I would say, because not always the king should actually go in the center of the board. But I like you to remember active king. But understand the reason so you can use it at the best. Since the king can no longer get checkmated if it's exposed, you can use it in an active way. This position is honestly completely winning for black, but black made the job so complicated because didn't follow the rule of keeping the king active. And here after this check, the king went to e6. If you follow the rule king in the center, this move is right. Instead, the right move would have been to play king g6. Why? Because while you can simply get rid of the pawns on the queen side by bishop here, take, and then let your a pawn run, white is going to try to get a counterplay by pushing this pawn. And in this game, black got lots of risk by allowing that pawn to be pushed, eventually lost a piece even, and then still managed to win the endgame. But it's very important to use your king, because now there is no way to push this pawn. Because if the pawn goes on a5, you just take it. So black has a very simple way to go take this pawn and then push this one, maybe support it with the other pawn, and just promote, make a queen, and win the game. We get to point number 5, and there are 8 positions that actually you must know in the endgames. Because principles are not always enough. Sometimes you have to know some positions and know if they are winning for you or a draw. For example, another student here made a mistake here and drew this winning position. What would you play? Is white to move? This pawn is going this direction. What do you play? And what he played is probably the most obvious move, which is to take this knight. The problem is that this is a theoretical draw. We need to know why this position is a draw, and this is one of the 8 setups that you need to remember. Let's start with the first one. This one is extremely basic, but please make sure to know that when the kings are far away, you can check very quickly if the king is stopping the pawn or not. What you need to do is to draw a square from the pawn by drawing first the diagonal and then going for the corners. And now ask a question: can the king get in the box with the next move? If the answer is no, the pawn cannot get stopped. So here you have 2 possibilities, a3 and a4. a3 is making a draw because the pawn is going to get catched by the king. a4 is winning. Number 2, disposition. What is the evaluation if it's white to move? What is the evaluation if it's black to move? In one is winning for white, in the other is a draw. If it's white to move, this position is a draw because the only way to move forward is to play f7. And after king here, there is no way to keep the pawn protected rather than king f6, which is stalemate. Instead, if it's black to move, the king has to move. And now after f7, the king has to go here to this square. So the king can support the pawn to promote. Now that you understand the logic, there is just one thing that you need to remember about this second setup. And is, where should the king go when it's black to move? The king should always go up and down in front of the pawn. So this is the right square, because after king one side or the other, you will be in time to play this, and now you have the stalemate. And you will keep doing the same. Even if the king goes somewhere else, is waiting, you keep going up and down, and there is nothing that white can really do. Number 3 is very simple. With the h-pawn is always a draw, because even if the king goes in the wrong square after king here, there is no way for the king to run and is a stalemate. Number 4, h-pawn plus a bishop. One color bishop is winning, the other one is drawing. This one is the right bishop. because let's say black plays a move after king here, the king moves. Now if you push a stalemate, so you first give a check, the king is moving, you give a check and you're promoting. But with the other bishop, this doesn't work because the king moves and his square is the same. After king here, this, if you push a stalemate, if you go with the bishop here, is also stalemate. If you waste a tempo, the king goes there. If you push, the king goes back, stalemate. If you give a check, the king goes here, and you're just repeating the same position. So this is a draw. Position number 5 is the end games where there is a queen versus a pawn about to promote. This is what my student needed to know. So usually these positions are winning for black. And how? Basically, step number 1 is to force the king to get in front of the pawn. And once the king gets in front of the pawn, you have one tempo to get your king closer. Ideally, you want to get your king close to attack the pawn so that you can take it. Okay, so how is black going to do it? By giving many checks, and now is important already. Once you get this position, you can go with the queen here. You are attacking the pawn. There's just one square for the king to protect. Now you can give this check. And once you give this check, the only way to keep the pawn protected is by going behind. And you get your king closer. You keep doing this, it's always the same technique. You just need to bring the king closer. And once the king is touching the pawn, you can just take it and you give checkmate. Unfortunately, this doesn't work. It's always a draw when there is F or C pawn. Why? Because after the same technique that we just saw, well, now the king gets closer. But what you have to do with white is to go on the other side. Check, 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 check. Because in this position, instead of hiding behind the pawn, you let the pawn go. You play king h8, and if the pawn is taken, it's stalemate. So for black, there is no way to make progress. This is a draw. With the h pawn or a pawn, is also a draw, unless there is a trick and the king can get close enough. Let's see. So here, if the queen is going around, it's going to be a draw because there is no way to avoid either the stalemate or to let the pawn promote. But king g6 is absolutely amazing. After king g2, you get the king even closer. And now, let's say, king f2, the pawn is threatening to promote. Queen b2 check. The king is moving. The pawn is threatening to promote. But now you let black promote because you play king g4, and after the queen is on the board, king g3. And there is no way to stop the mate on c2 without sacrificing the queen. And if the queen goes somewhere here, you give mate on g2. The same trick also works with the c or f pawn, but just if the king is on the right side. So with the king here, it works. With the king on the wrong side, it doesn't work. Here you play queen h2, pinning the pawn. King e1 is allowing the pawn to be promoted, but now king e4. The queen is promoting, and king e3, there is no way to stop the mate. If the king is on the other side, this is a draw, because after queen e2, what is black playing? King a1. If this pawn is taken as stalemate, so king b4, and now you promote to a queen, and after king b3, there is a check. So it's a draw. Number 6 is the Philidor, which everyone should know, but there are two important variations of it that you need to know. So the basic one is that here you want to stop the pawn, you want to stop the king from getting to the 6th rank by playing the move rook b6. And now if white is just giving a check, you go back. If white is giving a check, you stay here up and down. If the king is moving, you just wait on the 6th rank. You go one side or another, you just wait on the 6th rank. So the only way for white to make progress is by pushing this pawn. And every time this happens, you go back with your rook, and now you're ready to check the king until they offer you a draw. There is not really a way to make progress. There is not a way for the king to hide. And if the king gets too far away from the pawn to chase your rook, you can always come here and say hello to the pawn, win the pawn, and this is a draw. The reason why you need to know the Philidor is that if you just defend here passively, you lose the game. Because let's say rook here, the king goes here, you give a check, the pawn is able to push. Now, white is threatening checkmate, so there is just one passive defense, which is rook here. And this position is winning for white. How? Just bringing the rook on the other side. And we are threatening mate, the king has to run, we give a check, the king moves, the rooks are traded, but now the pawn is promoting. This works exactly the same with the f pawn, because the rook goes here, the king moves closer to the rook. Now we cannot give this check, but we can first push, king moves, now check, and we win. But you need to know that with the b pawn is a draw, because here there is first of all no way to go further with the rook, and after check the king is staying on this square. After check the king is going back, and now attention, g7 actually loses for black because there is check and the rook is lost. So this is actually just going to be a draw. Number 7, we are almost done, and this is the Lucina position. Very important because the rook's endgames are basically the most common in chess, and you need to know how to promote this pawn. Step number 1 is to kick this king a bit further on, and you do by giving this check. Now, if the king goes on e6, you're very happy because you can just move the king and you're going to promote next, and there is no way to give check and send your king back to d8. So the only square for the king is to go in one of those squares. Doesn't matter where the king goes. You play a beautiful move. Here you cannot go simply out with your king, because every time you go out, the king is going to get checked. If you try to get too far away, then the rook is going to capture the pawn. We saw this with Philidor. So you have to build a bridge, and the best way to start is by playing rook f4. Now let's say the rook is just waiting to see what, there is no other way for black to do something. Either they move the king waiting or they move the rook waiting. No matter how they wait, you go out with the king now, they give a check, you go out with your king, they give a check. Now you stay here protecting the pawn, and once they check you one more time, you go forward. There is no way to stop this pawn. The only way is to give this check, but now bridge is built, the pawn is promoting, and white wins the game. Last position that you need to know is when there are opposite color bishops. Usually when a player has 2 extra pawns, every endgame is usually winning. But opposite color bishops are tricky, and this position is, for example, a draw. There is no way for black to make progress. Every time this pawn is pushed, it's going to be captured. There is no way to move the king around because this pawn needs to stay protected. If this pawn is pushing, well, there is no way white can just move this bishop up and down. No way to push forward any pawns. So this is a draw. What if we switch the king and the bishop? Because this is actually winning for black. It might be confusing, but why? The reason is that now the bishop is passive, because the bishop is not attacking this pawn, and this means that the king is free to sneak in. That's why the best move here is king d4. The king is also blocked by the bishop, and even if the king could go there, then the bishop would come to give a check. So bishop somewhere is played. Now the king can sneak in, and so this pawn can advance. With 2 pawns on the 3rd rank is always winning for black. Once the right pawn can be pushed, the one of the same color as the bishop, then the other one can easily be pushed as well, and this is a win. If you enjoyed this video and your rating is still under 1500, check out this one. 7 tips that you must know. If you don't know those, you cannot even apply these ones. So check it out. Thank you for watching.